Funding for this program was made possible by WQED's members, the Allegheny Regional Asset District, and the Pittsburgh Foundation. Thank you.
I think poverty is. I think
Poverty.
Poverty affects people by zip code, by race, by community.
I think poverty reduction. It should be a community effort. I think we have a shared responsibility in that.
I think
Poverty is not something that has to be. We can change poverty, we can fix it, and we can't just address the symptoms. We have to address the systematic reasons for poverty.
What is think? The idea was to engage the public in conversation and, where it is appropriate, action.
I believe that we will win.
poverty really is the outcome of our socioeconomic system here in the United States.
We must love each other and support each other.
Our topic is poverty. We want you to help us frame how we even talk about it.
Why is there such systemic, hyper-segregation, poverty in Braddock? Because we put everyone in housing projects and we'll put the black kids down in Braddock. Poverty is the system being rigged against the people.
That conversation will then move into community conversations.
These two people come to you today as a resource of teaching. What we ask them is to tell us, what is the conversation that we need to have in our region?
We will move that conversation then onto social media.
What we see, society and media and people, even the people who do this work, the people who fund the people who do this work, they have a perception of poverty that doesn't fit reality.
Simultaneously, you'll see it begin to populate up on our website. We call it our virtual public square.
I saw my mother struggle to put food on the table. And a lot of times we went without meals.
We hope by the time we get to the live town hall meeting, we've generated a lot of interest, input, and initiative that'll result in action after the broadcast.
Hello, I'm Chris Moore, and welcome to Think. This is the third of a series in a continuing partnership with the Art of Democracy that invites people to come together on issues that divide us. Tonight, we'll talk about poverty in Western Pennsylvania and meet people working for change. We'd also like to welcome our studio audience to the Fred Rogers Studio, along with the folks watching online. We hope you'll join the conversation too. And now let me introduce Lisa Washington. She's our social media host. Lisa?
Chris, good evening. Always a pleasure to work with you. We've asked our studio audience to submit their questions, and we'd like you to do the same. Post your questions on WQED's Facebook page or on Twitter using the hashtag ThinkPGH. And if you have friends outside our broadcast area, this program is also being streamed live on our website at WQED.org/think. Chris, I know it's going to be an important conversation.
And a busy night on social media, too. We encourage you to get to those sites. WQED met with community partners who identified three main challenges on this issue. First, how can we solve the problem of systemic poverty? Also, how do we create coalitions to generate movements that address poverty? But our first topic tonight is how do we remove the stigma and reveal the true nature of poverty? You're about to see a young woman who knows that issue all too well, but she's now using her voice to help others overcome the stigma of poverty.
My name is Kim Ill. I'm an after-school site manager. I'm also a writer, a playwright, and an actor. I am from the Hill District. I grew up in Elmore Square, Addison Terrace housing projects. I was raised as a young child on Webster Avenue and on Bedford Avenue with my grandmother and grandfather. My grandfather didn't want us playing with the alley kids or the projects. It was a stigma. It was a class war. My grandfather thought he was better than. His whole thing was, I don't want you playing with them kids. If you play with them, you're gonna get in trouble. Stay away from them kids, they're bad. I don't want them to make you bad. He definitely didn't want us playing with the project kids.
It's funny because the projects is across the street from this house. He would come out on this porch and he would get dressed up with his pleated pants and his floor-shine shoes, and he wanted white people to ride down this street and see that he had something. Unfortunately, when my mother and father separated or got divorced, that we ended up living in the projects and nobody deprogrammed me, so I thought that because I was a product of the projects that I was just as messed up and undesirable or all the stuff that he planted in my head. I never was told otherwise. And so as I grew up, I thought because I lived in the projects, I was never going to be anything.
My mother and father got into an argument, and my father threw my mother down a flight of steps, and he broke her back.
She decided to leave him, and she took her 3 children, and she moved into Elmore Square, and we made a home.
We drove to Elmore Square. It was winter time, December, January, February, one of those cold months. Opened the door. The house was warm. It smelled like fresh paint. It was that ugly green project paint, but it was pretty to me. And it smelled like food. And this was our new home. It wasn't as bad as my grandfather had said it was supposed to be. My mother put baby powder in the sheets. So when we got into bed, it smelled fresh. So she made that experience happy, and that sticks in my mind. There was a break-in. To my knowledge, my mother was raped, and I can remember my mother screaming. He grabbed my mother by her throat and pulled her to the door and said, "Tell those kids to shut up." And she said, "Mommy's okay, be quiet." And we were quiet, and he left. Some children that live in traumatic situations, they survive by suppressing negative thoughts. And I truly believe I'm one of those people.
I understand what my grandfather was talking about right now. He wanted to keep us safe. And this square kept us safe. Don't go off the porch. Don't play with the project kids. I guess.
I was experiencing this sadness, but people always seen me happy. I mean, I used to go to college and I wrapped my hair in turbans and I would wear African jewelry and you are kings and queens and so forth. But it was a fake.
I transferred to Duquesne University and for the School of Journalism. So as a transfer student, I was told by the resident assistant, everyone look over to the left. You see that tall high-rise on the hill. What you're looking at is the housing projects. Do not ever go over there. It's a bad, scary place. Now, at that time, I was still living in Elmore Square, and they're telling the students who went to Duquesne University that where I lived was not a good place. Then that put me in a sad place.
I graduated from college, moved back into the projects, didn't have a job, and had to go on welfare. It was a scary cycle. I had to ask for food stamps. And getting the food stamps, when I went to get the food in the grocery store, I couldn't make a decision, and it just made me cry. I couldn't stop crying. And I eventually felt that I needed to get some help. And I started looking back on where it all started, and I think it started with the concept of that I was less than most people are because I lived in the projects. I would say that at least half of my life I spent in a state of depression. I'm a work in progress, and my first step was to know that it's okay to live in the projects. And as I acknowledge that, that's just one step to being better.
Joining us is the founder of Free Store 15104, Giselle Fretterman, and Executive Director of the Homeless Children's Education Fund, Carlos T. Carter. Mr. Carter, let me start with you. The story we just heard of Kim, is that too uncommon or too common in Western Pennsylvania?
I think it's too common. Even for me personally, I lived in the projects for 9 years of my life. So I could relate to some things that she said. Every experience I had wasn't exactly like hers, but I could certainly relate to her experience.
And children that you work with, they could relate to this?
Absolutely. There's a lot of shame around homelessness, and that's something we work to dispel and realize that people experiencing homelessness, because they're not defined by being homeless, they're just like everyone else, but people don't see their value because of how they're made to feel by others oftentimes.
Giselle, Free Store 15104, tell me about it.
It's this dignified, welcoming place where you don't need to tell me where you live. I don't need to know what you make or don't make. I don't need to see any forms filled out. You come in, and if we have something that you'd like, you're welcome to take. And this includes diapers and formula, clothing, shoes, accessories, toys, and food. And it's a truly just, we have 4 rules. Be kind, take only what you need, make a new friend, and pay it forward.
Those 4 rules.
Those are our 4 rules.
How's business?
It's great.
That's probably a bad thing, to tell you the truth.
Well, you know, people say, well, do you think the Free Store will always need to exist? And I think that, you know, I hope one day we're all doing great, and it doesn't need to exist for necessity, but we should still be concerned about reusing and sharing and such. At the Braddock location, we serve about 1,600 folks a month. Some are walk-ins, many are referrals through 211 or through other social service agencies. I think it's a good thing that people know we're there and that we're available for them. So I think that's a positive. They know they can come to us. And even when we're closed, we have a pantry that's open at all times. So someone can come at night and get food at any time.
Is the need that strong in Braddock? And I take it 15104 is the area code of Braddock?
It's our zip code. Well, yes, but we don't serve just Braddock. We have no residency requirements. So, you know, I know my residents, so I would see a lot of folks that I didn't recognize, and I would ask, you know, where are you coming from? And it was the Hill District, it was McKeesport, it was as far as Westmoreland County.
That's how wide the need is?
Right, and I think it showed that, one, this was a unique place for folks to come, and the dream was always that this would exist, a version of this in each community, so that the neighbors that are struggling can work with the neighbors that are doing a little bit better. And, you know, it's cyclical, so those times will change. And now we have 9 different locations across the state since we started.
Carlos, as executive director of the Homeless Children's Education Fund, I imagine there are 3 key words there: homeless children and education. Education is something you want to make sure these children can have so that they don't have to live in these kinds of circumstances?
Actually, as we know, a key root of poverty is the lack of education. And so our mission at Homeless Children's Education Fund is to advance the education of children and youth experiencing homelessness in Allegheny County. There are 3,000 youth experiencing homelessness, and that's not just people on the streets, it's people who are lacking a regular, fixed, and adequate nighttime residence. So we go by the McKinney-Vento definition, but that certainly impacts your education when you don't know where you're going to sleep, or you don't know how long you're going to be able to stay at a particular place. And so our goal, we work with 27 shelters. We create learning centers in shelters to foster creativity and critical thinking skills for kids, expose them to fun, STEM things, having a place where they can be a kid and where they also can learn and try to break some of those barriers and those stats that I mentioned a few seconds ago.
How can a kid be educated in a school district if they don't have an address?
Well, that's interesting. Well, if you're in a shelter, the shelter would be your address, or typically the people we deal with, they're not on the street. Most people aren't on the street, right? They're in a shelter, or they could be in a school district. But with the McKinney-Vento Act, if you're not in your home school district, they're required to transport you to your school district.
But is the school district bound to help you if that shelter is in their zip code?
They have to by the McKinney-Vento law, and that's what's important that people know their rights, because sometimes there are barriers. People don't have the appropriate paperwork. You know, if you're in a domestic violence situation, you have 15 minutes to escape in a shelter. You may not have paperwork. So if you are declared homeless, they are to let you be enrolled even without your record. So the McKinney-Vento law exists to help protect students.
We're talking also about the stigma of poverty in Free Store. Are people ashamed to come in there and get what they need, or is the need so great that they just come there because they have the need?
Well, when I wanted to start it, that was one of the questions that I had. You know, will people come? And how can we create a place that doesn't feel like that? So, you know, it's filled with signs that are really welcoming and really loving. And when you're there, you don't really know who is a volunteer and who's a shopper necessarily. Once you remove the money, the monetary exchange, we're all exactly the same at the Free Store. And I'm very open about my story to my shoppers. They know that I was undocumented for over a decade. They know that I was really poor. And I was raised by a single mom. And I always thought growing up, you know, what would have made my mom's life just a little bit easier? And we try to provide services that will help make lives just a little bit easier for the families that we serve.
All right, let's turn now to Lisa Washington, who has a question on social media. Lisa?
Yes, Chris, this question is, how can people shake off the stigma of poverty when everything from education to where you live is divided by income?
Well, Carlos, I guess that goes back to the previous question I just asked of you.
How can people or people
shake
themselves
off the stigma of poverty?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it goes two ways, right? I think it's how you see yourself. I like what Zig Ziglar says is your value does not decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. And a lot of times when you are in a position of poverty, you don't see your worth. So I think
that's a great statement from a speaker who is trying to energize people. But how many children have ever heard that?
Not enough. And I know me, when I do speaking to schools or whomever, I always try to remind kids of that. And even, for example, we gave 8 scholarships to kids who had overcome homelessness, and many of them we were put in the front page of the Courier, I believe, in August. They didn't want to be in a picture, but I reminded the students, I said, you should be proud. There are people who are a middle class, et cetera, who don't accomplish what you've accomplished. I said, you don't have to get in a picture, but no, you should be proud. As if I were an employer, I would hire you to know that you've overcome such great obstacles. You should be proud of yourself. You know, almost everyone got in a picture, and I was so proud of those students. You know?
Giselle, do you find the same thing, that stigma is there?
It definitely is, but I think the more people who have experienced it, who speak about it, who share their stories, you know, we find that there's a lot more similarities amongst all of us. You know, so many people I know have all grown up poor or have gone through that. And I think what's not addressed is the trauma. You know, trauma affects us on a really cellular level. And a lot of
poverty is associated with trauma?
Absolutely,
pain?
absolutely. You come home from school, you don't know if your lights are going to be on. Mm-hmm. You don't know what you're going to eat for dinner tomorrow. And it puts you in a survival mode, right? We kind of lose our long-term, we are not able to dream because we're thinking about where are we sleeping tonight, what are we eating for dinner tomorrow. So it almost kills your long-term vision because you're so set on just getting through today. And I think that
Did you experience that being undocumented?
Absolutely. I mean, we knew our life could have changed at any moment. We could have been deported at any time. We left our country fleeting violence, and we arrived in a strange place. My mom is now a housekeeper. We don't speak English. And I knew that I was still safer here than in my country, but I knew that could change at any moment. If we were pulled over, if someone reported us, we could have been deported at any time. So that fear, it still stayed with me even years after I was a citizen. I still find moments of that creeping up, of that fear.
And I imagine the same is for many children. It's hard to lose that kind of fear if you've experienced homelessness for some time.
It affects the wiring of your brain, so it affects you physiologically, the way you're wired. So if you experience homelessness, even once you're put in a stabilized place, it still takes a while. Kids are resilient, but it affects you. And so that's why kids have trouble grasping math and science and things like that. But with patience, a lot of work, and you know that they can rebound from that, but it affects you. It's very traumatic.
In that piece that we saw with Kim, she talked about her grandfather and the attitude he had. Mm-hmm. There are some people that sometimes think they are better than a group of people. Don't associate with those kids over there in the alley. And we've done so many stories on bullying. That must be part of it too, if your clothes are not those designer clothes that some kids are able to wear.
I've felt that myself before, and so you do, and you don't always speak about it. You can internalize those feelings, but I think people need to look at people from the perspective of not just looking down on them, but look at them from the perspective of empathy and inquiry, as Dr. Mike Wallop says. So asking people, getting to know, it's easier to dismiss a person than a label. So I think we need to work to know people. When you talk to
young people and you give them those quotes from people that you respect or who have motivated you, I wonder, do you see the bell going off? Do they understand? Is there a light that goes on somewhere?
Absolutely, and I think when you're authentic and you share your story, like I spoke to 50 young men a few years ago from Adonai Center for Black Males. And I looked at the survey, they liked the story about my father not meeting him till later and things like that. So when you share yourself, people see it's not about saying eloquent words, it's about sharing your heart and connecting with people.
They identified with that.
Exactly. And then so, you know, people can see that you're still human. You know, you're not from this, you may be from this era, but you're just like me. And so that's what I let people know right away, that I'm human.
Giselle,
and you can do the same thing.
Giselle, your husband is the mayor of Braddock. He has striven mightily to change that town that Steele has sort of let down. It used to be a bustling community. How do you personally deal with that when your husband is in charge, you're trying to do things with free store? I bet people point the finger at you and say, you're not doing enough. How do you deal with that?
I cry. I cry, and then I work through it, and then I get back to work. But I think it's okay. It took a while to know that it's okay to be vulnerable and I'm not a tough person, you know, so I get through it. And then I know there's still work to be done, and I know I can see the bigger, see, I'm gonna cry. I can see the bigger picture, and I can experience every day those stories. You know, I have shoppers who suddenly are now back on their feet, and now they're donors, and then they become volunteers. So you get to see those really great stories every day too. And that's enough to keep it going.
That's probably pretty important, that part where they come back to help out. They got a helping hand, and now they want to help out too.
And we experienced that a lot. I had a young lady who walked in with like a large box of diapers, like a wholesale size of diapers. And I didn't recognize her immediately. And she said, I was here 3 years ago and didn't have a single diaper, and you guys gave me diapers, and I wanted to give back. And it was really a beautiful moment, but we experience a lot of that regularly. And that's enough to keep me going after the tears.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you both for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Community forums are a major part of the Think Initiative. This year, WQED held its public forum in conjunction with the annual Thanksgiving distribution sponsored by the Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh. I was there and saw firsthand how local organizations are trying to help people trapped by systemic poverty.
You join the military and you're gonna be fine. You're a kid from McKeesport and you join the military to get out of McKeesport. You do 5 years in the military, you're coming back to McKeesport.
That's right.
You're never gonna escape that cycle because the system's set up against you.
Yes, I have an education. Yes, I'm a veteran. Looks on the outside can be very deceiving. My name is Shalisa Wall, and I would like to register.
Would you like to have a flu shot?
I would. I was engaged. He suddenly passed away February 10th of last year. It was so sudden. It just came crashing down. What I'm dealing with at home behind closed doors is my reality. Good morning, ladies. How's everybody? Good, good.
Do you get your flu shot every year?
Every year.
Every year? Good.
My reality is I was homeless. My reality was I was jobless and had no income and had to go and apply for DHS for cash assistance and SNAP for food stamps to put food on the table for my child. That was my reality.
What we find, people that are struggling with poverty certainly have difficulty getting access to health care, and something as simple as a flu shot may be too difficult for them to do. So this service is incredibly important because it can help protect them, their families, and the community.
Thank you, ladies. I appreciate you. You too. Thank you. I was thrust into this situational poverty. You know, it's not my permanent situation, but it's my reality that I'm dealing with right now.
The systemic issues are numerous, right? There's systems of poverty that begin with education, low wages, incarceration, destructured families. All of these issues are systemic, and addressing them is going to require us to get really honest about systems and policies that continue.
I walk in here and I remember being these kids running around. Well, my mom's got a bag full of food, and it's one of those things where you feel really grateful. When we start looking at what systematically creates poverty, things like prison. Like, I remember being a 10-year-old kid and watching my father get arrested for a marijuana charge. but they don't see the impact that has on families. Like my dad could not get a job after he got out of prison. And all that did was systematically make sure that we stayed in poverty.
We know very well that we don't have a representative democracy. So systematically, what we really need to do is we need to take back our government. When I look to Harrisburg, I need to see people who reflect my experience. I grew up in Weirton, West Virginia, in a steel mill town. Our lives rose and set on the profitability of that steel mill. And the best economic year my father ever had for a family of 4 was $24,000. I grew up in poverty and I didn't even know it. How did I not know it? Because I lived in a community that treated me with love and respect. If I was living in that same community today, my experience would be completely different. We would be the poor kids on the block and we would be scrambling to try to keep up.
Thanks for the bag.
That's a serious bag.
That
you got
is.
there.
Look at that. Looks good on
You get some applesauce?
Yes, why not? My daughter loves applesauce. Thank you. Finally one day I said, you know what, I gotta get up. This is not my life. I have more to do in this life. And instead of being suppressed, oppressed, and depressed, I got up. I'm great. I am going with brown. I'm positive. No, I love brown rice. I really do. It's healthier. I said, I can't lay here in my mama's basement. And so I reached out to an organization called the Veterans Leadership Program, and I went in for an intake, and they couldn't help me at the time. But 3 days later, I got a call from a lady by the name of Trudy Friend, and she is the director of the Project Journey program. And she said, I'll help you. I'll help you get housing. If you want to work, I'll help you get back to work. Whatever you need, I will wrap those services around you and give you a hand up and out of your situation.
With us now is Adrienne Wanoha. She is the CEO of Community Human Services, and Ben Stahl, Executive Director of the Veterans Leadership Program of Western Pennsylvania. Adrienne, I turn to you. In that piece, you say you didn't know you were poor at the time. The best your dad ever did was $24,000 a year with a family of 4. That sounds like poverty wages these days.
It was poverty wages at that time, and we didn't know that we didn't have resources. My mom did the best that she could. She used credit cards very wisely, and there were times that she didn't eat, and we didn't know that until I was in college.
So how did you deal with that? Were you like Kim in the previous piece? Were you the bad kids in the neighborhood that nobody wanted to play with because you were poor?
Not at all. Actually, in Weirton, we were like most other families. It was a steel mill town.
It was a shared environment.
Absolutely. It was a steel mill town, and there were kids that lived up on the hill, and their families had a little bit more money. But for most of us, our dads worked in the steel mill, and that was the reality of our lives. And folks drove mid-size economy cars, and houses looked very similar.
That may have been very good for that time, but what about now with steel having gone away?
Oh, it's a completely different town now. When I go home, I don't even recognize it. So many people have really fled from the area because there's no job opportunities. The steel mill is literally being torn down underneath people. And for some folks who had the opportunity to go to other places and do other types of work, it has been fine. But the reality is that there were generations of folks that all they knew was steel. And when steel died, it's a group of people who are saddled to homes in that community, who are saddled with a group of skills that they can't translate anywhere else. And most of those folks are now working in service industry jobs, and they're making minimum wage.
And I imagine they're proud people who don't want to accept any assistance.
Absolutely. It's really interesting for me. I have talked about homelessness for a very long time in my home, and people in Weirton say, well, there's no one homeless in Weirton. There's no one who's struggling with this problem. Well, that is one of those words that you would talk about very quietly, because no one is going to say, I'm in a crisis, I can't provide, because what that equals—
sounds like a certain element of denial.
What it equals to people is saying I'm a failure. And people can't do that. And they don't want their neighbors to see what they see as a deficit in themselves, not a real economic phenomenon. They see it as a personal failure.
Ben, let me turn to you, veterans. I've read that active service personnel, there's somewhere around 13,000 in the lower ranks who are on food stamps these days because they're just not paid enough to feed their family. That's got to be a crying shame in this day and age of vast and many deployments.
Absolutely. I mean, we're asking these men and women to put their lives on the line for our country, and they can't afford to put dinner on the table for their children. I think it's the fact that exists should open up some people's eyes to the epidemic of poverty that's going through the United States. And when you think about, poverty, it's such a taboo word. And I bet you if you poll the majority of, the people that are listening to this, they'd say they're middle class. But, that middle class now is so broad that if you're making $24,000 a year, you're saying, well, I'm middle class. And I think, as we deny that we're in poverty, I think that the rank of poverty is growing, and we just don't want to admit it.
What about veterans like Shalisa? What services are available for her as she suffered several setbacks? And these things can happen to anybody. People don't realize that most of us are 1 or 2 paychecks removed from the poorhouse, and there is no poorhouse anymore.
Absolutely. So the Veterans Administration provides resources. There's housing programs specifically for veterans. HUD sets aside funding specifically for veterans that works with the Veterans Administration. So there's permanent housing programs. There's resources available for veterans. However, that's contingent upon your discharge, your length of service. For some programs, the era of service. So if you were a Cold War Army veteran who did 2 years, there might not be a lot of services out there for you. There's a lot of services now for post 9/11 veterans, but it may be a little bit crass to say, but they're kind of young enough to spring back, and the generation that needs a safety net is kind of getting cut off.
Are they aware of all those services, though?
I don't think that the Department of Defense does a great job at the point of separation, letting people know what they're eligible for. I think most times it's pride. We're both veterans. It comes with a great deal of pride and not asking for help. So that's something that we see.
But Adrian sees that also in her hometown of Weirton, right? Yeah. All right, let's turn to Lisa Washington again, who has another question from social media. Lisa?
Chris, we actually have a question from a member of our audience. This is Ariana Behringer, and you have a question.
So I grew up in generational poverty, and I joined the Army 2 months after 9/11. And fortunately for me, I feel like my military career allowed me to get an education and actually break the cycle of poverty for my family. What can we be doing to continue that growth, to make sure veterans know what services are available to them, as well as those families that come from poverty, other options in terms of what's out there for them?
I think it's really essential that, I'm sure you went through TAPS class. It's kind of like drinking through a fire hose, and you're focused on getting home and seeing your family, and you're really getting some of the most critical information that you've been exposed to in quite some time. So I think that the real issue of separation is when commands are able to lose someone in that billet, and a command will keep you until the last second. So sometimes you're going to the transition class, you're a month away or 2 weeks away from going home, and then you're a week in this class, and then you're checking off a base. So I think that the military commands need to, it has to be a systemic change in the military to let people go a little bit before they're ready to separate. But it's kind of a catch-22, because that's not the military's job. It's to get people ready for their civilian career. It's to defend the country. So you have to maintain operational readiness. So it's kind of it's a balancing act. But I think that organizations like Veterans Leadership Program and other VSO advocates can do a great job of getting the word out, letting people know what benefits are out there. And there's resources available like PA Serves. It's a repository of resources that are available for veterans that you just reach out, call. If you're a veteran, call Veterans Leadership Program. We'll get you lined up with some resources that can help out.
Adrian, I wonder sometimes if if civilians go through the same thing. They just don't know what services are there, and then that pride gets in the way too.
Absolutely, and I think that it really speaks to the first questions that we were talking about related to stigma. When do we ever see information on television, on social media about resources that are available?
Tonight only.
Exactly. You know, we're focused on, are we going to get a new iPhone? Well, that's great for people who have the opportunity to get a new iPhone. But the reality is more people need food than need an iPhone. So where is that same level of drive with media to really talk to people about what the human experience is? We need food, we need shelter, we need medical care. These are critical issues, but we don't spend time or attention actually highlighting them. So you've got a group of people who already feel completely disempowered, completely overwhelmed, completely victimized, and like they've done something wrong, who are then supposed to try to navigate secret information that you find in the blue pages. I don't know when the last time was that someone actually picked up a phone book. There's blue pages with social services. People don't get information that way. So we really have to start talking more, and beyond media outlets like QED, who are very responsible to their community, we need to demand this. We need to demand this information as citizens, because it's our right and it's our obligation to really make sure people know that we're out there and to destigmatize coming to look for help. We need
to be better advocates for our own causes.
Absolutely. We need to be better advocates for human beings.
That sounds like a bottom line approach. Do people hear it? When I take it you've made this speech before. Do people
I've
hear
thought about
you?
it. It's interesting what people hear. People get very angry when they feel like they're being told that they've done something wrong. But we as a community need to recognize we have not done right by people. There are people every day. People every day in this community are starving. They have no medical care. They are sleeping outside. They are sleeping in abandoned buildings and building fires.
Adrian, let
That's
me be very
unacceptable.
vigorous with you and interrupt, because you know, you and I have talked about this before, there are a bunch of people who are watching right now who are saying they're just some lazy good-for-nothing coconuts and they ought to get up off their duff and go to work, just like I do every day.
Yes, and your neighbors who get up and go to work every day are having that experience. I went out on Black Friday shopping with my sister. A pair of pants, dress pants, plain black pants cost $80. That is 12 hours of work at minimum wage. They are your neighbors. They are working hard. They are doing everything they can to support their family. They are not lazy coconuts. They are hardworking human beings who are trying to hold it together, and that is a system that is stacked against them.
What about the fight for 15? Minimum wage hasn't gone up in a while.
Minimum wage, when you think about $7.25 is minimum wage, you can't get a value meal at McDonald's for $7.25. Not a value meal at McDonald's for $7.25. That is an hour of labor. And that's hard labor, because minimum wage jobs are hard and they are unsatisfying and they don't come with benefits, and people are abused in those workplaces. But we still somehow think that these are lazy folks. Working at McDonald's is not an easy job.
Ben, let's turn to veterans again. What do unemployed veterans need to do to take advantage of those many services that you mentioned?
You can, if you're unemployed, you can reach out to Veterans Leadership Program. You can call PA Serves. You can call United Way's 211 line. There's resources available for you. There's the VA's vocational rehab program if you have a service-connected disability or your time in discharges.
And whatever you do, if you're in the service, don't take a bad paper discharge.
No, and I think that some the extent there's a stigma with hiring just a veteran. You know, people think that every veteran has PTSD.
Come on, we're over that, aren't we? I mean, everywhere I go, when I put my Vietnam veteran cap on, they say, "Thank you for your service." Nobody ever told me that when I came from Vietnam.
I think we're guilt tripped into that. I really don't think. I mean, people say thank you for your service, but they'll still send your kid to war in a year or two.
All right. Well, thank you both for a spirited discussion. I appreciate it. You know, it takes a united front to defeat social problems like poverty. So how can we create coalitions that inspire and empower? These are some of the local people who are making a difference.
began as a coalition, and it really began to say that our unity is where our power lies. I don't care what religion you classify yourselves. I don't care what political party you are part of. Are you from freedom? Are you for justice? Are you for equality? All right, now let's get together and make this world a better place, because we're standing in a place that's rapidly changing. I'm a resident of East Liberty, and as I was driving down here, I said, oh man, it look a lot different. The complexion of East Liberty is changing, right? And folks are getting moved out and other folks are coming in. And so Pittsburgh is called the most livable city, but we know Pittsburgh is not most livable for everybody, right? But that's the Pittsburgh we have to live in every day. And so I did a song called America's Most Livable City. Welcome to America's most livable city. Please ignore these invisibles with me. See, Pittsburgh rebuilt its economy, but we still lead the nation in black poverty. Welcome to America's most livable city.
Welcome to the Think of Poverty Forum. My name is Chris Moore, and I'm really glad that you have turned out. We expect a lively discussion.
How do you encourage elected officials and citizens to make a commitment to poverty?
We need to start having conversations to look at the political causes of poverty, the political choices that are being made about where wealth goes in this country. And I think it's only then that we can start connecting the politics to our values and to how we treat each other.
You are my brother. It doesn't matter that you're white, it shouldn't matter that I'm black. We are brothers. And the only way we're going to turn this country around together is to work together.
I think coalitions are a lot easier than we think. I want my public dollars to support people living in poverty. I don't want anyone to think about where their kid's next meal is coming from. That could be me any day of my life. It's very easy to say to everyone you touch every day, that's my experience, that's my story. We need to have stories about the working poor who are using that money to make sure their family doesn't fall apart, raising their kids to be great citizens, raising them with compassion, working hard, contributing to society. That's the way we build coalitions. We tell our real story.
It's a lot of people's story. And until we start bringing light to it, then we're never going to be able to overcome it. And it needs to be told, and it needs to be heard, and it needs to be repeated, and it needs to be something that is right on the tip of your tongue. So when you see it in the news, when you see it in the paper, you understand that this is an issue you got to care about too. It's so easy sometimes for us to talk about one issue isolated from the other issue. But we need to realize that a fight for justice is a fight for all of our justices. That this is a unified fight. We got to stop trying to let people divide us on issues. We got to come together. If it's a poor issue, it's our issue. If it's an LGBT injustice issue, it's our issue. If it's a black and brown issue, it's our issue. If it's about our kids, it's our issue. It's all of our issue. This is our unified fight.
We got to come at it from all levels, right? Like, we've got to talk to the people that are experiencing it now. We've got to pull in people from social service organizations and churches and people who are supporting those families right now, but we have to get our legislators involved. We have to get those people that write the policies about how much we pay people involved and have a seat at that table so that they can see the people that they're impacting. And when we do that, we have a chance.
I say this as a pastor in the city. I say this as somebody who's a part of the LGBT community. I say this as a black person. I say this as a woman. I say this not just as a social justice activist. I say this as a social justice warrior. All of this is about all of us. We gotta be warriors in these streets, because that's when the battle's gonna be won.
Joining us now, Darlene Bigler, CEO of Blueprints, and Ken Riegel, Executive Director of Just Harvest. Darlene, the name Blueprints, it suggests that you're drawing a new diagram, a new frame, a whole new example of how we can attack these problems that we've been discussing this hour.
Exactly. We intend to help people break barriers and build futures.
And how do we do that? How are we making these new examples of how this can be done?
Well, by helping people where they are, by helping build pathways towards success, whether that be education, employment, whatever it is.
Ken, let me turn to you. Food insecurity, how bad is it, and how wide is Just Harvest's network in dealing with other food banks to help relieve it?
Food insecurity is bad. There's 155,000 people on food stamps right now in Allegheny County.
Just in Allegheny County?
Just in Allegheny County.
But you know what the view is. Every time someone sees someone going through the grocery line with that little green card, they go, well, there goes another tax dollar of mine.
And that's why we spend the first segment of the meeting this evening talking about stigma. When we think about what low-income people are going through in their day-to-day struggles, one of the things that we've got to consider is whether they're being unreasonably and unfairly judged by others. And for those others to embark on the struggle with us to make the changes in society that we need to make, because it's not on poor people exclusively to be the ones who fight against the stigma. We've got to stop sneering at people in the grocery store. We've got to stop building barriers. We've got to stop defining some people as deserving and other people as undeserving. I've been in this work for many years, and I have yet to meet a person who doesn't deserve to have enough to eat.
Ms. Bigley, you're nodding your head. You agree?
Oh, absolutely. We really need to help build a communication and help people understand the barriers that many of the services that are designed to help actually set up and keep people in poverty. And the public in general needs to understand that.
Wait a minute, stop. To keep people in poverty?
Oh, absolutely. Things like, for instance, the minimum wage, but also something that's referred to as the cliff effect of services, where people, as they earn more wages, the benefits that they get to help their families, help sustain their families, things like SNAP, food stamp benefits, child care subsidies, as people earn more wages, those benefits disproportionately go away, so that it keeps people in poverty. They have to make a choice between accepting food stamps so they can feed their family versus earning a little more wage.
So I'm trapped in a situation where it might be easier to just take these food stamps and to go work myself to death for $1 or $2 more an hour.
Sadly, that's the case, yes.
Wow. How wide is the network? I cut you off, Ken, before you started talking about that. With over 150,000 people in Allegheny County alone suffering from food insecurity, what sort of food bank network does Just Harvest work with to distribute food?
So Just Harvest is not in the food distribution business ourselves. There are many, many organizations, hundreds of food pantries, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, domestic violence shelters, all sorts of environments that provide emergency food and charitable food distribution, mainly led by in this area by the Greater Pittsburgh Community Food Bank. At Just Harvest, we're working at a systemic, at a policy level, to make the kinds of permanent changes in food stamp policy and child nutrition programs that are much more fundamental to whether or not we eliminate hunger than just treat the symptoms.
So you're working on changing the entire system?
We are working to get to a point where low-income people's voices are strong enough to demand that we can change the entire system.
And that's an important part. Are there more low-income people now? Is the crowd getting bigger? The voice getting louder?
The voice is getting louder. More people recognize that these problems are inherently political problems. They're inherently problems that are related to who's got power to make decisions in this country. During the war on poverty 50 years ago, we cut poverty in this country in half, and then we surrendered. And poverty has increased since because we surrendered in that war. And when we join together as a society, rich and poor, when we join together across class and race and zip code and all the other things that separate us to demand an end to poverty in this country, we can do it. But it's not going to happen by accident, and it's not going to happen without the voices of people identifying that as a struggle, not as a matter of collecting and distributing some food.
All right, let's turn to Lisa Washington now, who has maybe one of those voices that needs to be heard. Lisa?
We have another question from the audience. This question, Chris, is how can we ensure that those with more power do not dominate coalitions?
Darlene?
That's a great question. it's critical that in order to effectively tell the story, the people who are most impacted by problems be the spokespeople. And I think organizations like Just Harvest, Blueprints, the other organizations here tonight have a responsibility to help people build their voice, to empower people, to provide information, to help provide data that illustrates good points and really frames the issues.
Is there a balance between hearing those voices of people who are in poverty and the policymakers who know the system and how it works? Is there a balance in hearing both voices?
I think there is. Like Ken, I've been doing this work for a long time, and someone who's really impacted by poverty can tell the story much more effectively to a public policy or an elected official.
Does that change that public policy, though, at all, when they hear the stories?
Well, I think it's a drip, drip, drip situation where they need to keep hearing it until they get it.
You work on these policy things all the time, Ken. Are they hearing it? You've been doing this work a long time, as you said.
We've made enormous amount of progress over the long term. A generation of children has grown up in Pittsburgh with school breakfast in their schools because of work that Just Harvest did 30 years ago to persuade the school board that school breakfast is a thing that we ought to do here. We've been successful in getting local government to take hunger and food insecurity more seriously, implement programs that allocate city and county resources to hunger and poverty much greater than they did many years ago. We're working every day to push back against the really awful policies that are being engineered by the administration in Washington right now. The congressional debate over tax policy, budget policy, these are things that the community needs to organize and fight back against if we're going to continue that progress.
So these are larger policies that will have an impact on food insecurity and hunger and poverty, but people don't see the direct connection between them?
Some people see the direct connection, some people don't. We need to, I think the impetus is on us and organizations like us and the other organizations around the table this evening to make that case persuasively to affluent people and to low-income people alike, to get involved in our democracy and to make the kinds of changes that we need.
Darlene, do you see people getting involved in our democracy? Are we broadening the coalitions?
I think we are broadening the coalitions, but I think there are groups that are missing. And particularly I think about young people, people who are most impacted by poverty and the kinds of policies that we're trying to change. So as organizations and as a community, I think we need to bring young people to the table. I think we need to provide the kind of support they need so they can become effective spokespeople, as well as other groups who are always underrepresented.
In that rally that we saw in the last tape piece, it seemed as though there were a lot of young people who are finding their voice and it really expressing themselves. That would be a good thing, I take it, Darlene.
Oh, I absolutely think so, yeah.
You think so too, Ken?
Absolutely. There's an enormous amount of creativity in the movement for social and economic justice today that we all need to admire and lift up and give more opportunity to bring new voices to the table. There's an old saying that if you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. And I think that's the condition that we find ourselves in politically now, that we need to demand a place at the table for everyone. We need to reach across the divisions, build bridges from one issue to another, whether it's food, housing, health care, the other basic human needs that people have, and build the kind of broad coalition that does really build a movement.
Darlene, how do you figure out where you're going to go first? It sounds like, according to what Ken just said, there's so many areas to operate in.
Yeah, these are clearly very politically challenging times. And I think we need to, in our coalition building, we need to identify things that really are achievable so that people are motivated to keep going. You know, there are things like, for instance, payday lending. In Pennsylvania, through coalition building, we really were able to affect some very strong, some of the best legislation in the nation to stop payday lending.
Because that's one of the systemic things that keeps people in poverty.
It is, yeah, yeah. So I think we need to identify kind of low-hanging fruit when we can, and be successful and celebrate that and move on to the next issue.
I know Ben is gone, but the payday lending really affects many veterans who are finding hard ways to stretch that paycheck to meet, and they go to the payday lenders and they're really trapped in a real situation. Those are real key things. Ken, if there was another important area that needed to be addressed first, what would it be?
Well, one of the issues that we're working on every day at Just Harvest right now is the problem of food deserts, communities that don't have supermarkets and where it's very difficult for people to access food with whatever money they have. Being able to come up with solutions that are creative, grassroots, community-based solutions that give people more bang for their buck, that incentivize good decisions about food instead of trying to punish bad decisions. Efforts that create opportunities for small farmers, for small grocers, for mom and pop stores to be able to stock and sell decent food to decent people at an affordable price.
And pop, right?
That's right.
And how's that effort going?
We're making good progress. We're providing capacity at 21 farmers markets during the farmers marketing season to allow consumers to use their food stamp debit card. We're working with a network of small mom and pop stores in low-income neighborhoods to help them stock and sell fresh produce.
All right. Well, thank you both for being here. We appreciate your time, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
When WQED began the Think Initiative on poverty, many local organizations stepped up to take part. They helped us come up with important topics. They provided their expertise, introduced us to others who are active in the movement, and helped us guide us through the issues. We'd like to thank them for giving their time, sharing their staff members, and their resources. We could not have done it without them. If you want to add your voice to the conversation or learn more about this project, go to wqed.org/think or follow us on social media. We'd like to thank all of our guests and our studio audience for spending their evening at WQED as we discussed poverty in Western Pennsylvania. I'm Chris Moore, along with Lisa Washington. We thank you for joining us.